All right, we have a special guest on today's episode of Per My Last Email, Milly Tamati, who for the past 15 years has built a career on her own terms, a quote-unquote farm gal from New Zealand. She's co-owned a hostel in Thailand, launched a wine tour business in Australia, an illustration agency in the UK, and has visited 65-plus countries. Now, she lives on a remote Scottish island. I think the population is like 150 people or so. Building Generalist.world, a genuine space for generalists to gather and grow, where over 50,000 builders, tinkers, and operators read her newsletter. Truly a one-of-one individual. Milly, thank you so much for joining us on Per My Last Email.
Thank you so much. The only correction I can give you is it's 190 people on the island.
Whoa,
Not
big change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had a population boom. How is the island doing with that many new people?
Exactly. I mean, we're just, there's no, where do we go? There's no space.
It's tough. And
Yeah.
I thought you were going to correct me on the countries. Is it still, do you have an up-to-date number?
I kind of stopped counting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ish.
Once you hit
All right.
65.
Yeah.
I feel like.
I mean, you threw
Upward.
we threw the plus in
Yeah.
there just to cover
Plus,
our
exactly,
bases.
exactly.
Okay, we want to talk about generalists, and I think when I think of generalists, I think of you. I think Generalist.world, such a cool community that you built. We want to talk about that, but first, let's just define generalist, because I think for people listening, we say the word generalist, they probably all have a different definition in their head. So how do you define generalist, and what do you think is most misunderstood about that term?
This is such an ongoing thing, and I think in some ways, the longer I work on this, the less defined it gets, because I meet so many more generalists, and I'm like, wait, it keeps changing.
Yeah.
But it was actually Mildred, one of our colleagues, who defined it just a couple of weeks ago, that it's the one that I love the most, and it's a multi-passionate and multidisciplinary person. And so it's typically people who have had these non-linear, non-traditional or squiggly career paths. They typically don't fit into a box at work. And we kind of all know them. Like when you think of the person on your team who's like the get stuff done person, the figure it out person, the one who's like, you're like, I don't even really know what their job is, but I know that they're really valuable. That's what the generalist is.
Interesting. See, it's funny because I think when I've always thought about what a generalist is, I always view it as an early career luxury where you just
Interesting.
haven't figured it out yet. And so I've always thought, okay, I want to be a generalist. I'm trying to be a generalist, but I have a time limit on that. So I have the first 5, 7, 10 years of my career, and then I've got to decide. So if it's not that, which I'm sure it's not, what does a long-term generalist career look like?
Yeah, I love that, because I think that is one of the misconceptions and one of the misunderstandings. And I know that Kyle's a fan of Range by David Epstein.
Of
Yes,
course, I'm
huge.
glad you brought it up, because Kayla's
Yeah,
banned
it
me
had
from
to be.
talking
We're
about
what,
it on
3
the
minutes
show.
in? Like, it had to be brought up. And for me, this was such a click moment where David Epstein takes like different contexts. So where people have essentially done lots and lots of things in the beginning of their career, and they're not as far ahead as someone else. But then eventually there's like this curve that happens kind of in your mid-career where suddenly you like boost ahead. You really boost ahead. And so I think that's kind of what I see, like the people that we work with in Generalist.world are actually at that 7, 8, 10, 15 year, like mid to senior in their career rather than early. And I think one of the misconceptions is that being a generalist is only for early career people. It's actually one of my gripes. Like whenever I see someone's like, I'm hiring a generalist, 0 to 3 years. And I'm like, do you have any idea how valuable it is to have someone who's had 15 years of experience doing these different things? Because they're not going to come at it from the same way that a hyper deep specialist is going to come at it from.
Yeah, there's really interesting studies around who ends up becoming a CEO of a company as well. And I think this is just goes a little deeper on your point, Milly, which is they find that it's the person who has worked across the most disciplines inside the company.
Sure.
Because in some ways, CEOs end up being the ultimate generalist. You have to have a decent grasp and knowledge of all of the different things going on in your business in order to synthesize and connect and lead a variety of different people, whereas a specialist who's maybe only worked in one domain,
Sure.
tough to understand what the other parts of the business are doing necessarily. I want to kind of tease out this like generalist versus specialist distinction. So we've heard kind of the definition of generalist in what it is. What isn't it? Like, what are specialists in your mind then getting wrong with their approach to their career?
So I think my gripe of life is the specialist versus generalist debate, because I think it's a bit of a silly debate. I don't think it should be an either or. I think it should be an and. We need specialists. I want, like, if I have to have brain surgery, I want someone who's a deep specialist, like, to know how to do that. I think one of the things that is been a question that I've been playing in for the last 4 years since building this is that can a generalist have specialisms? And I think the answer is yes. And how I think about it is, like, right now, I would say I have a specialism in community building. This is what I spent the last 4 years going really, really deep. And I see it as like spikes of specialisms. And so I'm not going to be the top 1% in like one thing. That's not what I am. That's typically what a specialist is, right? You're like, you've gone really narrow. You are the best of the best. You're world class at that one thing. I think I'm, maybe top 10% in 3 or 4 things, which makes me, to your point, Kyle, this category of one. It's like there's no quite other person who has the same experience as me. And I think for people listening, that could be a really helpful like reframe where like there's not that many spaces to be the top 1% in something. You have to like go really hard at it. But what are the 3 or 4 intersections of the skills and the different expertise you can have, and how can that make you become the category of one?
That reminds me of that concept of the personal monopoly, which is like, you probably won't be the best marketer in the world, but you might be the best hockey marketer. Like, how can you combine the things that you love or are good at to become like the only person that is excelling in that role? Totally.
Yeah, there's the framework, like you either have to become the best or you have to become the only. And so like the best are the specialists, deep domain expertise. They are the best of the best. You're the top brain surgeon in the world. You're always going to have business. Or you stack, to Kaila your point, Milly your point, a very interesting collection of skills in which you become the only. The issue, I think, with the only path or the difficulty is, okay, you study brain surgery, you become the best brain surgeon. It's pretty obvious where you're going to go. You're going to go to a hospital and you know what you're going to do. If you become the only, the world isn't built to find and to slot you in and to fit you to where you're going to really shine and demonstrate true excellence. Like, you have a weird collection of skills. It's hard for a company or even yourself to be like, okay, yeah, I know where to go. How would you advise people, Milly? Like, they've built this really interesting collection of skills. They're a generalist. There is a lot of value there. They don't know where they fit, or the world doesn't know where they fit. How do they figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, this was me. This was literally me. I had just moved to this island with 200 people. I was working the weirdest job ever. My title was the director of miscellaneous. I felt like the biggest odd duck in so many ways. And I was like, I truly do not fit anywhere. And the problem is, it's like a blessing and a curse. I can put the hat on and I can go into a content community and feel okay. Or I could go into a product community or a founder community. I could go into these places, but I always felt like I had to dilute myself in those communities. And so this was literally the seed for generalist world. I think the challenge for generalists is it's so lonely. You're working these weird jobs, perhaps that have been made for you. Like, there's literally no playbook or no one's done them before. Where do you go? And so my advice would be find your people. And Generalist World has been an ongoing experiment of me just scratching my own itch and being like, I really want to be surrounded by other interesting multidisciplinary people who are walking these paths that no one else has walked this path before. Wow. Tell me more. Like, how is that for you? What are you learning? What's hard?
Do you feel like the end goal maybe for a true generalist is always or often going out on their own? Or is there a world in which maybe not CEO path, because that does feel like the other potential, but like, is there a world in which people can be in corporate environments and still maintain generalism throughout their careers?
The annoying answer is it depends, I think, on the person. What I have seen from my own work with many thousands of generalists is there's been a huge push to people going out on their own. Fractional freelance is like on this huge rise. Portfolio careers is on a huge rise. I think for the people who can make it work in corporate, it really depends on the company. It really depends if they have managers, if they can be a part of team that either, maybe they can internally rotate or they, whatever it might be. But I think my hunch is that there is going to continue, and this is probably more broadly, to be a push of self-employment.
I want to. There's like this interesting, I think, through line here for the generalist conversation, and you brought this up earlier, Millie, when you were like, for people who've had like squiggly careers, and my hunch is, because I would always say like, oh, I've had a very distinct, diverse career as well. I've worked in AmeriCorps and then in university and now in media, and when I hear most people explain their career, most people actually say, I haven't had a standard career. So maybe we just have that wrong. Like, I'm curious you've talked to more people about this than I have. My sense is we think there is this default career path that most people are going down, but most people aren't actually going down that. And in fact, most people do have a very squiggly career, and we just need to kind of rewrite that narrative. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you think, no, more people are going down these traditional career paths?
Yeah, I never know if it's my bias of like my bubble where I'm like, wow, so many generalists are popping out of the woodwork. I think the big thing that's changing is language. So when I first started Generalist World, it like was not sexy to say you were a generalist. Like even I, for the first maybe year of Generalist World, I would hate it when someone asked me, what do you do, for the obvious reason, being difficult to explain, but also because the word generalist had this huge stigma that was tied to it. And I think to understand that stigma, we have to go back to the Industrial Revolution, where we have all grown up for many, many decades in this time where it's like, you have one job, it's a secure one, it's for 40 years, you're going to go up the ladder. Like, we all know that story. And to be honest, even the world, like the world of work that we have kind of grown up in has been built for specialists. It's why the job descriptions you see are cookie cutter and you have to have 5 years of exact experience to even be considered for this other role. Never mind if you can do it with your eyes closed. So I think my sense of the world as I see it is that it's changing and people are realizing. I think particularly with like the two events, one being COVID, where everyone started questioning their career and their lives and what am I doing? But then the second, obviously, with AI, being like, oh, okay, I've now got 10,000 specialists in my pocket and it cost me $20 a month. Like, what does that mean for work? You know, so those kind of two inflection points, I think, have made it more mainstream. But you'd laugh because, I mean, I am so vocal. Like, every day I'm out, like, I don't have a flag, but I should. And it's just like generalists. And I still get emails 4 years on, every single week, every single day, messages from people being like, I can't believe this is who I am. I've never had the language for it. People describe it as a relief. Every time someone says relief, I chalk it. Again, I'm like, relief, like what a huge thing to do for someone to be like, okay, I'm not a specialist.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It makes the journey a lot less lonely. The one last thing I want to bring up, because you had talked about this earlier with, I have to bring Range up again.
Of course.
But David Epstein, I think it's really interesting too, just for people listening to understand the example David gives in the book of a generalist at one point is Roger Federer, which like if you saying that out loud, people would be like, that's totally a specialist. He is the best tennis player of all time, arguably. How can that be? And it goes back to the slope you were talking about earlier, Millie, where he stayed playing multiple sports a lot longer than his peers earlier in their career, who decided to focus on tennis. And the big unlock was then all of those disparate skills he learned from other sports helped him become an even better tennis player. So for me, when I think of generalists, it's more about the way you acquire skills and how those skills stack. A specialist to get good at X only does X, and a generalist to get good at X does a little bit of Y and a little bit of Z. That actually makes them better at X. And I think that's a really more maybe optimistic, positive reframe of how you can do other things, but they actually make you good at one thing that is very valuable as well.
Yeah, but then also that to me, that's what I was saying at the beginning too, is like, that's my expectation of a generalist, is that you're trying to get good at X. And like, oh, if in order to become the best violin player, I actually have to get really good at chess. But your goal is still ultimately violin, which is like one thing. And maybe I'm just like misinterpreting like the end goal.
Well, and maybe this gets into what we can talk about next, which is the portfolio career. And like, I think, Kaila, to your point, most people, myself included, are like, you get one job.
Yeah.
And so your goal is to get really good at one job. There's maybe different tracks on how you get good at that, generalist or specialist. There's now this blossoming portfolio career word I see popping up every day, which my understanding is you have multiple different jobs at different times, but I'm not even sure that's the right definition. Milly, you've talked a lot about portfolio careers. What is your definition of that? And let's dig into portfolio careers a little bit.
Yeah, you have a portfolio of revenue streams is how I look at it, and a portfolio of skills as well. I would, even though I'm like primarily a founder, I would consider myself to have a portfolio career. I make money through my company. I make money through being like a creator, I guess, through sponsorships, kind of reluctantly, as you can see. And I'm a writer, podcaster. Like I never try and own that I'm like just one thing, because I'm just truthfully not. And I think the portfolio career rise has really come from the more macro environment, where people are like, I don't know if it is safe just to have put all my eggs in this one basket, this one job, this one skill. How else might I protect myself? So it's one angle of it is like insurance. And then the other angle I think is fun. If you're like me, if you're a generalist, like I don't want to be doing the same thing day in, day out. I'm just not going to get meaning from my life and work like that. I'm creative and a little chaotic. And I love having these like different tracks of how my day looks.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
It's so funny because you talk about the insurance. When I was thinking about the portfolio career, it kind of stressed me out primarily because of the finances. Because my first thought was, okay, if I don't have a W-2 or if I don't have a 9-to-5, that what happens if I have 7 different revenue streams and 3 of them fall off? Like, how am I going to protect myself? And maybe that's like a very American approach. How do I get health insurance? But what is your take on the financial element of that change?
Yeah, I think the worst thing you can do if you want to have a portfolio career is try and start with 7. 7 streams.
Sure.
Stressful, like really, really hard to get right. Start with 1. Have your W-2, I think you guys call it, and do writing on the side, or do a podcast on the side, or it's just like, just try, dip your toes in and start with 1. Because I would argue that the opposite is also true, right? And I think this kind of gets into this tension of like, we think that life is certain and secure and guaranteed, but it's not. And like, to your point of like, what's the ultimate goal? Where are we going? Like, you might think but like, do you? Like, do we really? I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years' time or 20 years' time. We don't even know what the world's going to be like in 10 or 20 years' time. So I think there's like this element of like staying light on your toes.
Yeah, I agree. I think the main question is, do you have health insurance in Scotland?
Yeah,
that's really what we want here in the U.S. No, the other element of this that I'd love to get your opinion on, Milly, is this element of going all in versus diversification. You've heard of this term of like burning the boats, and I think you have a term called burn the boxes, which I want to get into. But like the burning the boats was the classic, like you don't have an exit plan, and that produces great results. You're starting a company. I don't want you to have also a newsletter and also a podcast and also a side hustle, because like the main thing needs to be the main thing in order to drive success. But I think what you're suggesting is this alternate vision to that. Do I have that right? Do I have that wrong? Like, what's your thoughts on going all in versus diversification?
Yeah, again, I'm never going to sit here and tell someone to burn the boats. I don't know your situation. Like, I burned the boat. I really burned the boat. I had the idea for Generalist.world and quit my job 3 weeks later. But I was also living on an island where you can't buy anything. And my rent is very, I'm not even going to tell you guys what the rent is.
I don't need to know.
It's very low. So as long as I live on this island, I have infinite runway for Generalist.world. So I was able to burn the boats. It's a privilege to be a founder. It's a privilege to be self-employed. And so the annoying answer, I think it depends. And I think people just need to have that honest conversation with themselves. And again, start small. Could you create one extra revenue stream?
Yeah, I love your advice around start small. And you mentioned, I think, $20 a month gives you a specialist in your pocket through AI. And you have all of these tools now that are democratizing access to launching your own newsletter, launching your own podcast, where 10 years ago, you actually need a little more capital or a little more know-with-all to build those things. My hunch is that it's actually becoming easier to start a portfolio career than it ever has been. My question to you is, are companies like, a morning brew or whatever, that most of our employees are W-2 full time. Do you feel like they're responding to the rise of portfolio careers appropriately? Because I think there is two paths companies have gone. One is embrace the other stuff that your employees are doing or personal brands, and it kind of creates this halo effect back in your company. The other is lock that shit down. Like you work for the company and we don't want you doing these other things. Advice to companies around this trend.
Yeah, be more flexible. It is the gist, because like your people, if you really want to retain this top talent, then work with them. And if they want, and like, it's so wild to me when I hear of companies being like, no, we don't want you to post about like anything else on LinkedIn or to have these other kind of social platforms. And I'm like, guys, it's all distribution. Let your employees post, encourage them, pay them, like get them posting and doing these other things. Because ultimately, if you want to keep your employees long term, then you got to keep them happy. And yeah, but I can't speak for the entire market of like how do companies feel about it, but I do think it's a slow uptake. That's my hunch.
Yeah. This to me sounds very stressful. I love having like boundaries, and not necessarily boundaries with how often I'm working, but like what my expectations are of me, how I can succeed. And I love knowing that at the end of every 2 weeks, I get a paycheck.
Sure.
And I think I'm viewing portfolio careers as slightly different than the like main job and side hustle. I feel like to me, a portfolio career maybe is eventually getting off of the full-time job and having multiple revenue streams. Do you feel like this is something that is possible for everybody, or are there specific personality traits, characteristics that make you more likely to succeed at a portfolio career?
Yeah, great question. I think to succeed at a portfolio career, you have to have that element, the same kind of like DNA of a founder. And you don't have to be the founder that wants to go raise millions of dollars, like not that kind of DNA, but the DNA of like, you are not going to have anyone hounding you to submit that client invoice. Like you have to be able to like manage your own time. You've got to be able to sell. Typically, you'll have to be able, unless you have a team on which you probably don't, especially in the early days, you'll be the one selling. So is it accessible to everyone? Probably not. And it's like anything. I don't think there's a single rule for like it's like, do I think everyone should be a generalist? Probably not. Do I think like everyone should have a portfolio career? Probably not. But where I come from is that there's this subset of person who absolutely should lean into their generalism. Everything will unlock when you do. And same with portfolio careers. You're being like diluted and wasted in this like W-2. So like, let's see how else we can add these extra streams. So there's like no one size fits all.
I want to talk a little bit more about AI, Milly, because I think from the outside looking in, when I know you generally, and
True.
Yeah, no pun intended. And growing up in New Zealand, farm gal, living on a Scottish remote island, even the analogies you make are like half of them are farming. It's like, it feels like you're like in tune with nature. When I think of that, I don't think of someone who would likely embrace AI. But from what I've heard, like you really have, which is interesting. Like, do you feel that tension internally, or like, how are you approaching your AI usage, thoughts on AI, advice to others, building with AI? Because I think you've done such a tremendous job with it, but it feels like you wouldn't be the person who would quickly embrace it, but you have been.
Yeah, I think that's the generalism in me of being like, ooh, something new, something like tools, technology, like I love that. I sometimes honestly do feel like I'm living two lives because I spend, I might go sea swimming in the morning and then walk and there's seagulls above me and no one on the island knows what I do. It's amazing. They're like, she works on a computer or something. Like no one has
She's got
idea.
internet?
Yeah, it's fantastic. But then I open my laptop and there's this like whole literal generalist world.
Yeah.
And how I think about AI, it's kind of complex. I think everyone's feeling this tension at the moment, like, oh my gosh, it's so helpful and it's so cool. And gosh, what does the next kind of 5 years look like? I think how I'm thinking about AI is my ultimate goal is to figure out how to use it to spend more time out in the forest, is the honest answer. And so I don't, and to never outsource the things that bring me joy. I remember like when, I can't remember what tool it was, some kind of tool came out and it was like, you can like, or it'll create like AI videos for you. And I was like, that sounds fun. And I tried it once and I was like, wait, I hate this. I love making videos. Like that's the part of my job I like.
Yeah.
Why am I outsourcing that? And so I think it's really important to stop before you just like dive deep into it and be like, what are the things that I'm outsourcing? What are the things that I'm like holding on to and protecting? And I think a great example of like just the opportunity for generalists using AI is our weird job board. I don't know if you guys saw this. It was like a total whim that I just built on Claude Code one Saturday morning. And the premise was we have this newsletter, goes out to like 60,000 people every week and it shares jobs. And I was like, oh, what if I just like built a like simple website on Claude Code, publish those jobs and like built all these automations on Claude Code so it just operates like totally like autonomously. And within 2 weeks, I think 700,000 people had seen it. Within 3 hours, people were paying me to feature their job on it. Like it made money in the first, I think it was even the first hour.
Amazing. Good ROI.
Great ROI.
Yeah.
And this is, I say that as an example of like a generalist who loves tinkering and like sees opportunities. The time to like have that idea and then test the idea and it's in market is very, very fast. I can't code. I'm non-technical. And yet I could build, people were like, who's your designer? I was like, their name's Claude.
Claudius? Have you heard of him? Yeah. It's a great example. I love the metric of optimizing for forest time.
Yeah.
That might be my new thing.
Yeah.
Convinced
OFT.
me.
OFT, I'm into it.
Yeah. Do you think that portfolio careers and generalists, people that are maybe having non-traditional careers are going to benefit more from AI than the specialists, perhaps? Mentioning 10,000 specialists in your pocket, I'm thinking of 10,000 specialists that are no longer needed. So do you think it's more long-term beneficial to be a generalist given all of the tech?
My hunch is yes, with the caveat that no one knows what's coming, including me. And because no one, but all I do know is that I can feel it. I'm sure you guys feel it too, that it feels like everything's changing kind of beneath our feet. And typically it has been generalists who are, I guess they kind of specialize in a way of being beginners and learning again and being adaptable and being like, okay, so the context has changed, my job has changed, and they're able to like reinvent themselves. And so it's difficult to say, but I feel safer in this economy, in this future of work, as someone who's really embraced their generalist skill set. And I can honestly say that my life, that sounded so dramatic. I was going to say my life started when
AI came out.
When I stopped being like, oh my gosh, like I'm a generalist, and I just started owning it. I can't even. I'm on Morning Brew in New York. Like, come on. Like, it's the opportunities that have come just from like not trying to be like the specialist that I'm not, but just being like, actually, I'm really great at these things. Has been life-changing.
I love that perspective. I think it just speaks to like authenticity.
Yeah.
And people are drawn to authentic people, whether they're a generalist, a specialist, a W-2 portfolio career. It's about owning who you are, not being ashamed of it and embracing it. And you'll find your people if you do that well enough. Milly, I have one final question for you, and then I think we want to do a little thing called perma-last policy, which is very fun. But I'm so impressed by you. Like even your description of how you like spun up this job board and you know you get a paying customer in an hour. You've done so much. You've applied this generalist portfolio career philosophy to your own life, and I'm thinking of how extremely valuable you would be to so many companies. And I hear some companies explicitly say, we want founders. We love having ex-founders join our company because they're resilient, they're gritty, they get shit done, they're high agency, they know how to sell. They're used to being the only one, so they can do it all. What would it take for a company to hire you? And then this is a legit question because I think a lot of companies want to hire people like you, but going back to this thing, there's no box to put you in. What's your title? What does she do? But like, there's so much value there. How would a company get you to join full time?
I'm going to spill something that I've never said publicly.
Here we go. Exclusive. Air horns. Insert air horns here.
Does Idja know this? No, Idja does know this. But in January of this year, within a 2-week period, I had 2 separate companies, both of who I won't name them, but you know them, headhunt me. And I distinctly remember the call with one was like, you're like the best movement builder we've ever seen, and name your salary, name your start date. And I'm not going to lie.
That's
like,
great. That's cool.
1 billion.
Yeah.
That's with a B.
And I start in 5 years, but you pay me today.
God, I missed a trick, guys. I should have come to you. And of course, I considered it, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I optimized for spending time in the forest. And I am so hyper aware that I have this one tiny short life on this earth. And do I want to do it? Like, I feel like generalist world is still in its infancy. We're still, and it like the way the market, the way the world is going, I feel like there's still so much room for growth. And I also freaking love the work that I do. And I was like, the minute that I sign up to another company, I'm not going to be my own boss. I'm not going to have my agency really over the things that I do. And I'm not going to be able to get to hang out with generalists all day, which is like my love language. And so I turned both of them down. And it was a moment. So what would convert me? I don't know. Maybe, and like never say never, right? Like maybe a different season of my life. I'm like, okay, maybe I pass the reins. I don't know. But for now, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be.
I think there's also just a lesson for everyone in that answer, which is deeply understanding what matters to you. And I think if you don't think about that, the default becomes money or a job title.
Yeah.
But it's so clear that you've figured out what matters. And we do have a very short time, if we're lucky, on this earth.
Sure.
And like figuring that out, I think, is the most important first step. So kudos to you, Milly. Kaila, do you want to play our little game here?
Let's do it. So we have a game called Permalist Policy. It's a segment we play every so often. It's basically if you had a magic wand that you could wave and change one policy across every single corporation. Ooh. Every company now has to adopt this. We've been very silly in the past. We've said stuff like, you've got to bring back, early millennials cringe perks. I want ping pong tables at every office. What would your magic wand per my last policy be?
Oh, well, it has to be something around hiring generalists, right? I think specifically it might be, it's kind of like how you have like diversity quotas and like you have to make sure, you've got diversity in teams. I see having generalists on your team as having like cognitive diversity. So I would say there has to be some kind of cognitive diversity and you have to have X amount of generalists on your teams.
A chief generalist.
And they get paid really, really, really well.
Yeah.
All right,
a chief generalist, exactly.
We'll try to get you a magic wand. That sounds like a good policy. I like that. Milly, thank you so much for joining us on From Last Email. This was super informative conversation, and also you're a very inspiring person, so thanks for taking time to chat with us today.
This was so fun.
This is great. Should we roll the credits?
Let's do it. Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Luis Farias.
Jim Orso is our audio engineer.
And our president is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be generalists with you next week.
See y'all.